Hey guys, this is the Wiggle Man and welcome back to Wiggle's Miniature Workshop. Today we are going to be painting a 3D printed Screamer Killer Carnifex from the new Leviathan release. And also as a thank you to all the support on the last video, on the Vash Tour video, I was really pleased to see everyone engaging in the comments, loads of likes coming through, loads of new subscribers, so welcome to the channel. So at the end of this video I'm going to be giving this model away. Stay tuned to find out how to win it. And of course, for those of you who already have 3D printers and are interested in printing this model yourself, I will naturally leave the STL down in the description below. It is a free file, so have at it, enjoy, and yeah, have some fun. So instead of the usual painting tutorial / guideline I go over during my videos, this one's going to be a little bit different. Today we're going to talk about 3D printing. And what I want to do by the end of this video is help you understand whether or not this is the hobby for you. Through the video, I'm going to be discussing some pros, some cons, what kind of gear that I use, and everything that kind of revolves around 3D printing as a hobby. So to start off, what kind of a 3D printer do I use? Well, I actually own 3 3D printers. 2 of them are resin printers, which I use to do most of my miniature models, and 1 is an FDM printer, which I really need to spend some more time with. Never quite managed to wrap my head around it. So as such, in the sense of discussing the 3D printing hobby, I am going to be talking mainly about resin printers today. So the main printer that I use is the Elegoo Saturn. It's the original Elegoo Saturn. I picked it up around its release time for about £399 when it launched. I also have the original Elegoo Mars. I purchased that not long before the Mars 2 came out, and at the time of purchase it was about £149. If you're looking at getting into making miniatures essentially as a hobby on your 3D printer, I definitely recommend an Anycubic Photon M2. That's a really good budget 3D resin printer to get you into the hobby. Again, I use my Saturn to do most of my printing, but that's because it's the one that I've got set up. You can easily print out a model like this on an Anycubic Photon M2. And looking right now, just looking at the Anycubic website, it's currently going for £199 in the UK. I also, whilst looking at 3D printer prices, saw a Elegoo Saturn, the same one as mine, refurbished for £149.99. So this is the exact reason as to why I got into resin 3D printing as a hobby. At the time, I'd heard about resin 3D printers. Well, I'd mainly known about FDM 3D printers, and I'd heard resin was emerging as a thing that was really good for printing miniatures. I decided to take a look at the time as to how much 3D resin printers were, came across the original Elegoo Mars, realised that some months I'd spend more on Warhammer boxes alone than I would on a 3D printer. So naturally, sounded like a really good value proposition to me. So I got one. And I've had resin printers for about, I think, 4 years now. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows when it comes to 3D printing. You have to bear in mind that there are some parts that are considered consumable to a 3D printer. The FEP, that is the sheet of clear plastic that goes at the bottom of your resin vat where you pour the resin into, that wears out over time and does need replacing. It's not really too expensive. I picked up a roll of several sheets for, I think it was about £39, and that's lasted pretty much the entire lifetime of my Elegoo Saturn at the moment. That's about 2 years I've had it now. And I'm coming up to probably about the 3rd FEP change that I've had to do. I think it's due. I will be doing it in the next few days. And as such, also, if you pick up an LCD screened printer, not a monochromatic screened printer, the screens are also considered as a consumable component of the printer. So the original Elegoo Mars, that used an LCD screen. You will find that the majority of 3D resin printers nowadays use monochrome screens, but LCD screens have a much shorter shelf life, essentially. Each time you burn a layer through on a 3D print, that wears away at the screen. It does it with monochrome printers as well. However, again, I've had this Elegoo Saturn for 2 years now. I've not had to change the screen yet. On my original Elegoo Mars, I had to change it once about every 6 months. So, pros and cons around resin 3D printing. Well, first pro is that you get amazing detail out of it. Again, you can just see by the detail on this miniature alone, it is enough to rival Games Workshop's plastic sculpts as they are. Easily beats Forge World sculpts. And even if you look closely, very closely, sometimes when Games Workshop put out their kind of previews of models that are upcoming, you'll notice some layer lines. They use resin printers in-house to print out prototypes for their models. But we'll talk more about Games Workshop and 3D printing later on in the video. Next, we're going to talk about one of the cons of 3D printing, which is using the resin itself. 3D printing resin can come in at a bit of a cost premium. I tend to use Elegoo's water washable photopolymer. That's a mouthful. Elegoo's water washable photopolymer resin. I tend to get that for about $29.99 per kilogram off of Amazon. Now, I know that people tend to poo-poo a bit at water washable resin. They say that it tends to split a lot on hollowed models, things like that. Me personally, I have had that issue, but I've realised what the cause of that issue is, and that's not washing off your model thoroughly enough. If you do move to use water washable 3D printing resin, make sure that you wash your models as much as possible. Twice the amount that you think you would need to make sure that you get off any excess residue, any excess resin that may be caught in hollowed parts of the model. This in turn will stop any issues like your 3D print cracking, which can happen. That tends to be due to trapped resin inside the model, releasing fumes. The fumes have nowhere to go, and they make a crack in the model to release the fumes, essentially. So price, yes. $29.99 for a kilogram isn't actually that bad of a deal. However, through my calculations and through using a bit of an FDM printer as well, for about 20 quid I can get a kilogram spool of 3D printing filament. And I also find that because of how FDM printers tend to work, your models will weigh about half as much as a resin 3D print, because resin is denser than PLA plastic. So whilst PLA and resin, there's not that huge of a gap difference between them in price per kilogram, you would use about twice as much resin as you would PLA for 3D printing, which is where the cost comes from. The other ball ache about resin is the fact that it is goopy. It is horrible to work with, and it's a nightmare to clean up. You need to make sure that you wash down any surface that you use, that you place your 3D prints on after using it to print, essentially. I made sure I got a silicone kind of slap mat that I've got my 3D printing set up on top of. So it's important to remember that if you do get a 3D printer, you need to make sure that you set aside a specific place for that 3D printer to go. So on top of that, the final kind of negative point that I have from 3D printing, I know a lot of people say fumes. I'll be honest, I've never noticed a smell of resin. My final point is the kind of the post-processing that you have to do after each print. Look at it this way. If you get a FDM printer, if you get a normal plastic printer, most of your work is done at the beginning of the 3D print. Now, if you've got a resin printer, most of your work you do at the end of the 3D print, if it's successful. What do I mean by this? So you need to make sure you wash down the model thoroughly. Again, I use water washable resin, so I blast it with an outdoor tap. And then what I tend to do is either leave it out in the sun to cure, or I have a very powerful UV lights and a nice little kind of box setup. There are wash and cure stations. I haven't tried one myself. I see that most people tend to use them when I do look around at other people 3D printing, so it may be worth investing in a wash and cure station just for the convenience of it. But I've found my post-processing kind of workflow works for me at the moment without having to invest that little bit more money into the hobby. Now, we're a good way into the video, so those of you that are still here, you're the cool guys. You're the people who are committed to the channel. So, how do you win this guy? To enter, all I want you to do is leave a comment below, leaving a number between 1 and 250, and I want you to make sure that you're also subscribed to the channel and that you have your YouTube profile set to public. If it's to private, that's fine, that's up to you, but I won't be able to see that you have been subscribed to the channel. So I will be holding the competition until the 14th of July, at which point I will then do a small live stream where I will go on a random number generator, generate a number between 1 and 250, and whatever number it lands on, I will search through the comments, look for the first person to post that number, and then I will check if they're subscribed, and then I'll be messaging them. Now, there's no cheating allowed. I only want one post per person. I will check to see if they've posted multiple times, and I will discount any further attempts after the first post. So why am I doing this? Genuinely, this is a thank you to kind of the small community that we're building here on Wiggles Miniature Workshop. And I just want to do something a bit different, something a bit nice for you guys, because you guys help me by watching my videos, liking my videos, commenting on my videos, subscribing to the channel. So this is me effectively saying thank you for giving me your time. Here's me trying to give you a little something back for my time as well. So back to 3D printing as a hobby. Games Workshop and 3D printing. So this is kind of a big point of contention in the community. Me personally, I'm a very laid back kind of a guy. I don't play the game. I enjoy the lore. I enjoy everything that kind of revolves around Warhammer. I got my first set when I think I was 12. I think my parents got me the 4th edition starter set as a birthday present. Real fucking weird, Mum and Dad, having the Dark Eldar in that. Glad they didn't look into it too much. And I think that stemmed from my personal love of Ian Livingstone fighting fantasy books. As a very young boy, I adored just looking at the pictures in fighting fantasy books. And then I'm sure my mum found out that he went on to co-found Games Workshop, and that's where he ended up. Wasn't very far from where I lived at the time, and that was kind of the birth of my hobby from there. But I've never really played a game. Now, do I buy Games Workshop products? Absolutely I do. While I missed out on getting a Leviathan box from my local, friendly local game store, I did spend some Warhammer bucks this month on an Orc Combat Patrol, so you will be seeing some Orcs on the channel very, very soon. But in my head, kind of my personal thoughts about 3D printing and Warhammer is, one, don't take 3D printed Warhammer into a Games Workshop store. That's just silly. It is their IP at the end of the day. They want you to buy their boxes to play their game. And it's a very self-contained environment that they've formed around that. And more power to them. It is their IP at the end of the day. They can kind of make the rules of what you do in their stores. So that is totally understandable to me. Playing with your friends, absolutely. I would use 3D printed Warhammer to play with my friends if I had any friends that played Warhammer. Same with going down to a friendly local game store. As long as you make sure that you're putting money into that game store, if you're going down there to buy paints, hobby supplies, maybe even other companies' games, I don't particularly see a problem with that, as long as you're not going in there and just using their table space for effectively free. Make sure that you're a customer. Make sure to support your friendly local game stores. Now, as someone who loves building and painting, basically the hobby element of Warhammer, one thing that really, really caught my eye is they do allow 3D printed entries into Golden Demon Awards. Now, if you're not sure about what Golden Demon is their annual, Games Workshop's annual big Warhammer painting event. They have the open category where for 2 years in a row, Tom Hughes has been a finalist in the top 3 with his amazing Orc bust last year, and the year before he had a bust of a Tau Fire Warrior. Now, I'm not sure about the Tau Fire Warrior, but the Orc bust was 3D printed. So in that regard, I actually have a lot of time for Games Workshop, because that is the foot in the door, so to speak, of them accepting 3D printing as a part of the hobby. And that's really, really good. So in regards to playing competitively, no, I don't agree that 3D printing is the way to go. They'll have made the model in proportions for how the game is wanted to be played and things like that. And yes, it may look cool, but I tried personally to keep 3D printing out of the tabletop hobby. In regards to just making stuff what looks cool, absolutely, 3D print all the way. The Games Workshop have forged an incredible universe between Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, that's come a long way, and of course we've got the Old World coming up as well. So I think it's nothing but good for Games Workshop that there are people out there that want to expand on kind of the imagery of the grimdark universes that they've created. Of course, their legal team's probably not particularly happy with that. We all know how litigious that Games Workshop can be, and even to this day, so a very, very popular sculptor named Duncan Shadow, who I have actually featured one of his sculpts on this channel before. It is the Plague Bearer bust. He's had the MCA takedowns given to him for works that he's had up for sale. It was on a definitely not Wraith Knight proxy that he recently had taken down. Now, that's unfortunate, but again, it's IP lawyers doing what IP lawyers are paid to do, and that is protecting the IP, which is unfortunate. Which leads me on to Cults 3D. Cults 3D, it is kind of the rebel standing up to Games Workshop, the website that refuses to take down essentially take down notices given to it by Games Workshop if they don't deem it valid, if they feel like there's been enough change to a model that it doesn't infringe on Games Workshop's copyright. They won't take the model down, which is quite interesting to see. It's great, and it's a fantastic resource if you want Warhammer models. As you'll notice, this Screamer Killer proxy, this is from Cults 3D. But for me, 3D printing isn't just about Warhammer. Now, a lot of you have probably found this channel over the last couple of weeks because of the Warhammer content that I have returned to doing, and I will still do Warhammer content. However, what I discovered from resin 3D printing is that I like painting more than just Warhammer. The first 3D print I ever did was the Plague Bearer bust by Duncan Shadow that I mentioned earlier. Video is on the channel, by the way, go check it out, of when I first painted it versus when I painted it about 2 years later. But that really, really struck me because I thought to myself, well, I'm painting something that's about the size of a Bloodthirster that's just a normal infantry unit. And it was really, really fun and enjoyable to paint, as anything that is Nurgle related. I love painting Nurgle stuff. And then I looked even further. There's loads and loads of essentially fan art 3D models that are available either for free or for purchase. Be wary, you do need to buy a lot of 3D models if you want to paint them, and you will end up with a back catalogue just as bad as your Warhammer back catalogue. So bear that in mind. You're not going to solve your hoarding problems if you get a 3D printing. You're just going to move it onto your hard drive. But there's so many amazing artists out there, 3D artists, that put their models out there for 3D printing. Another example is 3D Art Guy. He makes amazing looking, definitely not Warhammer models. And his models are either paid for on a CG Trader, I think, but also he has a monthly Patreon, which is how you're going to build up your collection of STL files. There is another artist who I am just bringing up on my screen now, come on computer, who I am currently printing out one of their models because I'm really, really excited for it. It looks really, really cool. And that is Ramizat Sakharov 3D. Probably butchered that. But he's got 4 files available on Cults 3D at the moment that are all free, all very, very much Warhammer related. And they look absolutely incredible. And again, I'm really, really looking forward to painting this one up, as long as it all comes out all right on the printer. But yeah, what I ended up, sorry, I kind of got sidetracked a little bit there. But what I discovered when I got a 3D printer was that I love painting statues, I love painting busts, and that in turn has helped me develop as a painter 1,000,000 times faster than spending loads and loads of money on Warhammer every month, because you can afford to mess up a model. Don't get me wrong, you're still spending money on the resin to print the model, but it is nowhere near the cost of a Games Workshop miniature. So it's a fantastic tool for practicing, improving your painting skills. Anyway, I should probably wrap this up because I've been waffling for nearly 20 minutes now just about 3D printing and how I enjoy it, how I got into it, and how you too can start doing the hobby. So I'm going to leave you now. Again, if you've watched this far into the video, I love you a lot. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And don't forget to check out, if you skipped over here, you naughty boy or girl, don't forget to check out the earlier portion of the video where I tell you how to win this 3D printed Screamer Killer Carnifex. Anyway, thank you very much for joining. Have a lovely day, and goodbye for now.